Hey guys, Retro Reviews here again with another Transformers video review. This time I'm taking a look not at the Cybertron Starscream figure, but the Galaxy Force Starscream figure. So, this is the Takara release of Starscream, where he was released as a Voyager class figure. Unlike the one that we got here in the United States, where it was a Supreme class figure with a little bit more to do, but just more or less was this mold blown up to sell at a Supreme class price point. So we'll talk about that at a later date, but for now we'll be focusing on the Galaxy Force Starscream. Now, this is his jet mode that we see in the cartoon. Very heavily influenced on the traditional Tetrajet that we see in the first episode of the first Transformers series. Now, unfortunately, I only have one of the Siege Starscream figures, and I don't feel like transforming that one back and forth. So, we'll just do the size comparison and visual comparison in robot mode, so we can see how this guy stacks up in that case. But for now, we'll focus on this right here. And also to note is not only is it the based off of the G1 Tetrajet, this is also a lot more closer to how Starscream appeared in the War Within comics. So a nice little double reference right there to the alt mode. For details, we do have this nice red striping going through the figure. All of the red on this figure is painted on. None of it is cast in red plastic as far as I am aware of. So everything red on this is actually painted, which is a very amazing feat. We also have a nice purple, clear purple cockpit. Going back to what I said on Thundercracker's review, is that yes, there's a seat, but on Thundercrackers it made sense to seat a human in it because he was an Earth vehicle. This is Cybertronian. Nothing would fit in that. So if Cybertronians have never encountered humans, why would they have a cockpit that could seat a human in it? That makes no sense. But aside from that, everything else on this mode works perfectly. We do have a little bit of the visible head going on here, but given that this is a Cybertronian vehicle mode, I can forgive that. I can forgive robot mode parts being so egregiously hidden, because this is not, at this point, he's not a robot in disguise. This is his transport. This is how he can easily get from point A to point B without having to walk. So that I'm perfectly fine with for Cybertronian vehicles having visible heads. So one thing I do like to point out, these are hard plastic. The wings can also kind of position this way. I think that's mostly just to prevent breakage because they're so thin. But we also get some nice thruster details, and we get this back wing here. It's all pretty nicely done. Unfortunately, the one thing that the in this mode that the Supreme class version does better is that these cannons on either side of the jet mode are actually articulated. They can pivot up and down. These are just fixed as part of the mold. So it's a little bit of a downside, but at the size of this figure and what they were going for, it's perfectly understandable. Now, for size comparison, I'm bringing out the Siege Voyager Optimus Prime. And as you can see, this thing is massive compared to a modern day Voyager. I'm going to say it again. This mold would have been released over here in the United States at $20 in 2005. This was released in 2019 at $30. Which one looks like bigger bang for your buck? It's going to be the big jet guy. Now, one unfortunate thing to mention about mine, I am missing the missile launcher to this guy. It was just... Honestly, I'm not too worried about it because all it was just a... It's a gun. It's a missile firing gun. There was very little detail to it anyways. It was just a cylindrical black piece of plastic on a peg with a purple missile. So I'm fine with not having that for this figure because I still got this figure at a decent price compared to what other markets would be having them for. One thing I do want to point out though is that as a jet, he has wheels. He doesn't have any folding landing gear, but everything for his landing gear here is just pinned in wheels, so he can roll pretty well, which that's nice. We also do have his force chip. Now this is, since this being the Takara release, this is a force chip compared to a Cyber Planet key, and one of the big note differences is there is no code on the back. Yeah, in the Takara markets, the Galaxy Force toy line did not have the website's promotional tie-in that the Cybertron one had, where if you went online, you would plug in the code that was on the back of the keys that came with each figure, and it would give you detailed extra additional information about the character. So they didn't get any of that over in Japan. They just gave us these regular force chips. Now this is the generic Decepticon one. The Cybertron Defense team, the Cybertron Defense Hotshot, Scattershot, and Red Alert came with this key, but with an Autobot symbol on there. The same with Primus, but Primus's Autobot symbol was silver instead of red. So I'm not going to show off the Cyber Key gimmick in this mode because it is frankly really pathetic and it works a lot better in robot mode. But there is the key jack is kind of just recessed in this area right here. So there's that. Now on to the transformation. This thing does have a pretty fun and interesting transformation, but it is still pretty straightforward. First thing to start off is come here and rotate these out a little ways, and then come to the front of the jet and start pulling that stuff apart, and then come underneath here and fold out the legs, and then rotate them forward. Come along to the back of the legs here, and we're going to fold out the heel spur, fold in the nose cone, and straighten out the foot. And then do the same on the other side. We're going to set it on the ground right now. There we go. That's why it wasn't sitting even. And then bring our camera up. There we go. Oh, next up we're going to fold this back section here all the way down and click it into place. Take these sections here underneath and fold them forward like so, and then fold the arms down, come to the back split the wing and fold it down. And there we have Starscream in his robot mode. Real quick here, going to zoom in, take a look at that head sculpt. Very, very nice head sculpt. I like this one a lot. Essentially looks like a traditional Starscream head sculpt, but with some added flair, specifically the vents on the side and on top of the head. And all that's painted, actually. His face is painted silver, but these parts are painted in a gray to kind of match the gray plastic of the body of the figure. So, there's that. Now, for articulation-wise, well, for detail-wise first, I want to point out, there's nothing really that new for detail. Everything is exactly as we saw in vehicle mode, with the exception of the forearms right here. These guys were kind of hidden away, but even in this mode, there's not really much to do with them. So anyways, articulation-wise, this figure has pretty decent articulation for the time. Not perfect, but decent. Head is on a 360-degree swivel. The shoulders are ratcheted, allow for 360-degree rotation, as well as they do bend outward a little bit. But just having them straight down, you can't really bend them out. You have to bring them up at least one click in order to bring them out. Elbows are kind of pathetic. They're ratcheted 90 degrees. Get cat hair all over everything. And the detents on the ratchets are very minimal. You get 1, 2. And that's it. We get ratcheted hips, nothing in the waist, nothing in the wrist. But we do get ratcheted hips that can go all the way forward and back, and they can also bend out all the way. So that's really nice. And then we get, thanks to the transformation, we get a huge cut in the posability for the knee. And the ankle can kind of pivot just due to the transformation, but that's really not much that we can use for articulation. So, yeah, that's pretty much what Starscream's got going for him articulation-wise. Now for the size comparison. Gonna go ahead and bring him up with first the unarmored Ultra Magnus, so we can get a good comparison of how he stands next to a modern day Voyager in robot mode. Now keep in mind, Ultra Magnus and Optimus and the Siege Optimus are about the same size in robot mode, so if that gives you a good example of what they look like in vehicle mode compared to one another, and robot mode compared to one another. So he's a little bit taller than Ultra Magnus, and also bringing out, just so we can have a look side by side of Tetrajet Starscreams. We've got the Siege Voyager class Starscream and the Cybertron Galaxy Force Starscream. So, yeah, as you can see, this guy does take a lot of cues from the original Starscream design, just as a Tetrajet. and the Siege Tetrajet Seekers are a little clunky compared to the way Galaxy Force Starscream did it, but they're also better articulated, so nothing else really to say about that. Now, getting on to the Cyber Key gimmick, we're going to go ahead and bring out our Force chip from before, and now that we can see it a lot better, there is the key jack, and just by plugging the key in, now hopefully I can get this on camera because it is very, very cool when it works. But go ahead and plug the key in, and at both times, at the same time, both arms spring out these clear purple swords, which is a very nice touch. And yeah, even though there's not, oh hey, and I forgot there is a swivel at just above the knee too. And as I was saying, even though there isn't much the posability can do, once you bring out those swords, it does help a lot with the dynamicism of him on display. It looks really nice like that. Now, for an added touch, I do want to point out that this figure has one drawback to it, and it is its size. As you saw, it was a pretty decent size compared to modern day Voyagers. But let's say if we bring out a Voyager from around the same time, for example here, Nemesis Breaker, you can see he is quite small. Let's get him stood properly. But yeah, he's at least a head smaller than Nemesis Breaker. And he's about and Nemesis Breaker is actually tall for a Voyager still, back then, but it feels like Starscream is lacking a little bit, and also comes to the fact as to why this design on his chest is the way it is. Was this Starscream mold was actually built to have electronics. I don't remember where or how the electronics would have been activated, but if you go on to TF Wiki, you can actually they actually show a picture of this chest area being broken open, and there's area for wires and stuff to go through, and it's this area too. So I think the electronics, the battery pack would have been housed in here, and the speaker box would have been right here. So I think the reason why this mold is so much smaller than any of the other deluxes or Voyagers at the time is because of them omitting that speaker box so far in production. And also just because I want to get the Decepticon team out, and so maybe the electronics would have had something to do with plugging in the cyber key. And bring out the whole Decepticon team that we have reviewed so far. So yeah, there is Starscream. Now, while I do have the Galaxy Force rendition of Starscream, this mold was also released 2 other times in the United States. One was an almost thrust deco that was 2-packed alongside Vector Prime, who was unchanged from his his Hasbro release. The other one was in the 2008 Universe 2.0 line, where it was repainted into Dirge. So any 3 releases of this mold, I feel like if you were to go pick up, you would have it's a pretty fun mold to have. Yeah, so if you could find just the Galaxy Force version, or if you could find either 2 of the releases of this figure, it's a really nice mold to track down, and I highly recommend it. I'm just really happy with getting this version of Starscream, and when I eventually get the Supreme King Starscream, I'll do a review and comparison between the 2. But I kind of like this display going on right now, where he's not towering over Megatron just yet. So, anyways, this has been Ratchet Reviews. I hope you guys like this video review, and I will see you next time. Bye.